Boldwood presents The Secret to Happiness, written by Jessica Redland and read by Lucy Brownhill. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Chapter 1. Alison. It had to be time to get up for work. Surely. Alison stretched her arm out from under the duvet and retrieved her mobile from the bedside drawers. The bedroom briefly illuminated as she checked the time. 5:38 a.m. Not time for work, then. She turned her head towards the window. It had been raining for 3 hours and 47 minutes now. Starting with a torrential downpour at 1:51 a.m., it had now settled into a slow but steady rhythm, and she'd been wide awake for every single drop. Beside her, Dave was in a deep, untroubled sleep, punctuated by the occasional grunt or snore. She slowly turned over to face him, but he had his back to her as usual. He muttered something when she gave him a gentle nudge, but didn't wake up. She was about to give him a harder shove, but stopped herself. What was the point? He'd only tell her to go back to sleep. Sleep. If only she could. And he'd tell her that getting upset about it wasn't going to change anything. No, it wasn't. But a hug and comforting words might help her find the strength to face the hardest day of the year. Peeling back the duvet, Alison pulled on her fluffy dressing gown and padded downstairs to the kitchen. The familiar feeling of despair enveloped her as the fluorescent tubing flickered, then burst into life, revealing the concrete flooring, bare plaster, and dilapidated dark wood units. Oh, the joys of living with a builder. A house full of unfinished projects, because Dave couldn't bear to spend his evenings and weekends doing what he did all day. Of course, paying someone else to do it was completely out of the question. She'd stupidly suggested that once. Never again. The dining room had been out of action for 4 years, because it was packed out with boxes containing the new kitchen. It wasn't good to moan about that, either. Besides, they had no social life, so who would they invite round for a meal, even if it was in use? He promised this would be the year for sorting it, though, and had even booked a week off work next month to finally fit the kitchen. She wouldn't hold her breath. Alison placed a giant mug of milky, sugary tea on the coffee table in the lounge and took a few deep breaths. It was time. Crouching down, she opened the cupboard on her grandma's old dresser. There it was, nestled under Trivial Pursuit, a guidebook for Corfu, and a pack of playing cards. She lightly ran her fingers down the navy spine of the large photo album, goosebumps pricking her arms, then carefully removed it. Curling up on the large tub chair, with the unopened album resting on her legs, Alison closed her eyes and breathed in and out slowly, trying to steady her racing heart. 15 years. Had it really been that long? As she slowly turned page after page, photos first, then newspaper clippings, the rain continued its patter against the front of the house, and Alison's tears kept in time with the slow and steady rhythm of the drops. Alison was in the kitchen eating breakfast when she heard Dave thunder down the stairs. She glanced at her watch, tensing. He was running late as usual, which would somehow be her fault. "Where have you put my phone?" he demanded as he strode down the hall, sounding more like an army sergeant than a loving boyfriend. A hefty 6'3" rugby player, he dominated the kitchen doorway, blocking out the natural light from the glass either side of the front door. "I think you might have plugged it in to charge in the lounge," she said softly, knowing full well that he had. When Dave returned to the kitchen, phone in hand, she looked up at him expectantly, but he didn't even glance at her. She willed him to look at her, to hug her, to tell her he was there for her. He'd forgotten last year, but surely he wouldn't do that again. "What were you doing up so early?" he asked, his voice still gruff. Alison felt herself deflate. "I couldn't sleep," she muttered. "Too much in my head." He yanked open the fridge. "Where's my butties?" Alison's shoulders drooped even further. "In the blue container." She picked up her second warm croissant and slathered it with butter, blinking back the tears. He'd forgotten it again. He was more concerned with his sandwiches than her, as usual. Pushing a stray dark curl behind her ear, Alison took another deep breath. She'd have to prompt him. Last year she hadn't said anything until the following day, and he'd had a go at her for not reminding him on the day. She wouldn't make that mistake again. "So, it's the 11th of May today?" He closed the fridge door and stared at her. "And?" "And, well, it's, you know."
"Ali, I'm late. Spit it out or shut up."
His eyes bored into her, and she felt that momentary burst of confidence ebbing away. "Never mind. It's nothing." Dave dropped his packed lunch into his toolbox.
"Where's the bananas?"
Damn. She knew she'd forgotten something. "It's still on the shop shelves? Sorry. There's pears."
"Bloody hell, Ali!"
he snapped.
"When have I ever liked pears?"
She continued eating while he wittered about pears being the devil's fruit. Why did he have to make such a fuss about little things like that, especially today? Watching him choose a pear from the bowl, with such a disgusted look on his face, it could just as easily have been a decaying mouse, Alison shook her head and bit into her croissant again, closing her eyes as the melted butter oozed onto her tongue. Heaven in pastry format.
"Jesus Christ, Ali!"
She snapped open her eyes, startled to find him right next to her.
"No wonder."
He shook his head.
"No bloody wonder."
She flinched as he grabbed his toolbox and stormed out of the kitchen. As the front door slammed, she ripped off a piece of croissant and crushed it between her thumb and forefinger, a mixture of guilt and frustration flowing through her. She hadn't needed to ask him what he meant. She could fill in the rest of the sentence for him. No wonder you're so fat. No wonder you keep ordering bigger uniforms. No wonder the stairs leave you breathless. No wonder we never have sex. She surveyed the plate full of pastries, the full-fat butter, the luxury jam, her third giant mug of milky, sugary tea, all for one person. Yes, no wonder. She had a good excuse for the feast that morning, though, not that David acknowledged it. As she cleared the table, tears welled in her eyes once more. How could he have forgotten again? Maybe he'd remember that evening. Maybe he'd come home with flowers and a hug. Alison wiped the table with such a furious swipe that crumbs scattered across the concrete. Sod it. They could stay there.
"Morning, Ali. Morning, Chelsea."
Alison couldn't see her, but she knew that Sarah the florist was hidden behind the enormous floral arrangement travelling past the reception desk of Whitsborough Bay's only 5-star establishment, the Ramparts Hotel.
"Morning, Sarah,"
they both called. Alison inhaled the fresh, heady scent. Oh, they're gorgeous.
"They weigh a ton."
Sarah placed the vivid orange, purple and cream arrangement on the end of the granite desk, then rolled her head and shoulders.
"Oh, I swear I get a better workout from my contract here than I would from any gym membership."
"I've never set foot in one. I wouldn't want to," Alison said. "How I maintain this silt-like figure is a complete mystery." She ran her hands down her curves and shimmied, making Sarah and Chelsea laugh. Watching Sarah reposition a couple of violet calla lilies, Alison sighed. "I love flowers. Shame the only place I get to enjoy them is at work." Sarah looked up.
"Dave doesn't buy you flowers?"
"Not even supermarket ones."
Not even today for the anniversary? Chelsea asked. If only. Alison picked up the day's visitor schedule and scanned down the names, the words blurring on the paper as tears pooled in her eyes. She would not cry. She was stronger than that. Besides, she'd already cried a reservoir that morning, so there couldn't possibly be any water left in her body. He gave me nothing, she admitted. Not even a hug. Do you think he forgot? Sarah asked. Alison shook her head. He'll mention it tonight. He's always running late on a morning. The thing was, in the early days, it was because he couldn't resist her, pulling her back to bed or joining her in the shower. Not anymore. What had happened to them? Where had the intimacy gone? Together since they were 17. The first 6 years had been so good. As for the last 4. But every couple had rough patches, didn't they? That's all this was. I bet he'll have a surprise planned for you when you get home, Sarah said. How many years are you celebrating? Tears under control, Alison looked up from the paperwork. She took in Sarah's eager smile, and her stomach clenched. Another person who didn't know. She'd have to tell her. It's not that kind of anniversary. It's actually... I'd like to check out. Room 387. A heavily pregnant woman accompanied by 2 nursery-aged girls stood in front of the reception desk. I won't be a moment. Alison tapped a few keys to retrieve the guest's bill. Was everything all right with your stay, Mrs. Hanson? It was lovely, thanks. Ask her, said the older child, tugging on her mum's skirt. Mrs. Hanson frowned at her daughter. Shh. Ask her. Shh. Is there something I can help with? Alison asked as she printed the bill. No, it's nothing. She's being silly. I am not, cried the child. Ask her. No. Leaning over the desk, Alison smiled at the girl. I'm here to help. You can ask me anything, sweetheart. Honestly, it's nothing. Mrs. Hanson tried to put her hand across her daughter's mouth, but the girl wriggled from her grasp, and then it was too late. The child looked up at Alison, all blonde curls, chubby cheeks, and innocent big blue eyes. Is your baby a boy or a girl? Alison's stomach churned as though on a spin cycle. Smile. Just keep smiling. Olivia! Her mum cried. She turned to Alison, clearly mortified. I'm so sorry. It's fine. With shaking hands, Alison passed her the bill. If you'd like to... A MasterCard was thrust into her hand. You haven't said... Olivia wailed. Mummy's having a baby too, and I want a brother this time. If she has a girl and you have a boy, can you swap? Mrs. Hanson jabbed her pin into the card machine, then stared at it, snatching the card the second the transaction completed. I'm sorry, she muttered again. Alison plastered a smile on her face and turned to Olivia. I'm not having a baby. Olivia's face scrunched up with confusion. But you have a big tummy like my mummy's. The heat in Alison's cheeks cranked up another notch, and she felt sweat pooling under her arms. Yes, I know, but that's just because I'm just fat. Alison had never seen a pregnant woman, 2 kids, and a large suitcase move so fast. Grabbing her blazer, she indicated to Chelsea that she was nipping to the loo. She escaped from behind the reception area and dashed across the palatial lobby, through the empty bar, and into the ladies. Moments later, she slumped down onto the seat in the furthest cubicle, her head between her hands, gulping in the bleach-tainted air. It wasn't the first time it had happened. A teenager had given her his seat on the bus. She'd smiled and thanked him, thinking he was being chivalrous, until he'd said, My sister's having a baby next month. When's yours due? She hadn't found the strength to correct him, so had mumbled, The month after. and prayed the conversation was over. She took a chocolate bar out of her blazer pocket. Hands shaking and stomach gurgling, she ripped open the wrapper, the intense aroma of cocoa soothing her. Biting off a large chunk, she closed her eyes as the chocolate melted on her tongue, easing the tension in her shoulders. She eagerly took another bite, then another, until she devoured the whole bar, barely tasting anything after the first divine mouthful. Staring at the empty wrapper, Alison shook her head. How many times had she done that? Sat in the same cubicle, surrounded by opulence, secretly scoffing chocolate. She glanced down at her uniform, stretched across her body. Dave was so right. No wonder. When Alison emerged from her hideout, her heart raced when she spotted she wasn't alone. "Sarah, I didn't hear you come in." Sarah rose from the deep rose chaise longue. "I wanted to check you were okay." "Me? Why wouldn't I be?" she responded innocently. "Too much tea this morning." She moved to the sink and squeezed luxury lavender soap onto her hands, cursing that she hadn't flushed the toilet. "But you haven't been to the loo, have you? You've been eating chocolate." Alison stopped mid-rinse. "How?" "Because it's exactly what I'd have done. Exactly what I did do. Frequently." "Yeah, right, because you're so enormous." "I used to be," Sarah declared proudly. Alison turned back to the marble sink and finished rinsing her hands while trying to find the right words. She didn't want to offend Sarah, but the last time somebody had said, "I used to be fat," to her, it turned out they'd gained half a stone and ballooned from a size 8 to a 10. Hardly the obese category into which Alison fell on those hideous height-weight charts. She turned off the taps and wiped her hands on a sumptuous cream guest towel. "I lost 5 stone," Sarah said. "No." Alison spun around to face Sarah. "Really?" "Really." "How?" She tossed the towel into the laundry basket. "I dumped my useless boyfriend. I was a comfort eater, so I needed to get rid of what was causing me discomfort. With Jason gone, I didn't need to turn to chocolate, cake, or kebabs, so the weight came off. And I go running on the beach. Never thought I'd get into that." She smiled gently. "Are you a comfort eater?" Alison shrugged. "I think I'm just an eater. Full stop." "Do you want to lose weight?" Alison shrugged again. "I'm not sure." "If you're happy, then don't change a thing. Personally, I think you're amazing exactly as you are." Sarah paused and cocked her head to one side. "But people who are happy don't usually hide in the toilets, troughing chocolate. Remember, I've been there, done that. I know it doesn't help." "It's fine. I'm fine. I just—" Alison's voice cracked, and she shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. Who was she kidding? "I hate the way I look, Sarah. I hate the way I feel. I hate the way other people make me feel. Like that little girl just now. Yet I can't seem to stop eating. What's wrong with me?" Tears tumbled down her flushed cheeks. Sarah held her arms out, and Alison gratefully accepted the hug. She was used to Dave's grumpiness, and could usually laugh off incidents like the one at reception. Just not today. She clung on to Sarah, as sobs racked her body. "Thank you," she said when she'd calmed down. Sarah nodded. "Any time. If and when you're ready, I'd love to help you." Alison wiped at her smudged mascara. "Thanks, but I think I'm a lost cause." "No, you're not. I believe in you. You just have to believe in yourself. You can do this, Ali." Someone believed in her. For that brief moment, Alison felt inspired. "Okay, you're on." She removed another chocolate bar from her blazer pocket and handed it to Sarah. "Amnesty time." She could do this. She really could. Chelsea told me what anniversary it is, Sarah said. I'm so sorry. I remember it happening. You must have been quite young. 12. I'm here for you if you ever want to talk about it. Thank you. It means a lot. Especially since Dave clearly didn't care. Back home that evening, Alison found Dave sprawled on the sofa in front of the TV, shouting at the football and guzzling lager. The house smelled of the lasagna she prepared the night before. Had he actually taken the initiative and put it in the oven? Wow, wonders would never cease. I'm home, she said, when he didn't look up. Did you have a good day? Dave punched his fist in the air. Thank you, ref. Told you that was offside. She coughed loudly. Did you get my lager? He asked, eyes still glued on the TV. No. Was I supposed to? I texted you. Told you to get a case on your way home. I didn't get a text. He sat upright, jaw clenched. Jesus, Sally. You winding me up, right? She shook her head. Why didn't you go on your way home? Because you always do the shopping. This is my last one. He took a final glug from his can, then crushed it and dropped it onto the threadbare carpet. I can't watch the footy without a drink. She hesitated in the doorway. Stay, go. Either way, she'd ruined his evening, and he'd be in a foul mood for days. In all honesty, she couldn't bear to be near him right now. The old Dave would have held her while she sobbed, and reassured her that he was her family, and he'd never leave her. But the old Dave had barely been around for the last 4 years. I'll go now if you like, she said, trying to sound cheerful. He'd already turned back to the TV. Damn right you will, he snapped. You can take the van, he added in a gentler tone, as though he was doing her a huge favour. And you might want to get something for your tea while you're there. What about the lasagna? I've eaten it. Alison's eyes widened. All of it? That was 4 portions. Shoot! No, you pussy! You kick like a girl! Her throat tightened. Had he forgotten? Or was it simply that he didn't care anymore? She wasn't sure which was worse. 30 minutes later, Alison sat in Dave's van in a deserted corner of the supermarket car park and prized open the flap on a 5-pack of custard donuts. Saliva filled her mouth as she breathed in the sweet vanilla scent. She paused as she pictured Sarah's eager expression when she'd reassured Alison that she wasn't a lost cause. Closing the bag, she took a deep breath. She could do it. Starting now, she was taking control back. Then she pictured that familiar look of contempt on Dave's face that morning, and that tiny flicker of self-belief fizzled out. Sorry, Sarah. Maybe another day. To family, she whispered, taking a donut out of the packet. I miss you all so much. 6 minutes later, Alison licked her sticky fingers and stared into the paper bag. All that remained was a small dollop of custard and a sprinkling of sugar. No wonder. Chapter 2. Danniella. Danniella crept down the stairs of Sunny Day's guest house, eyes fixed on the front door, ready to sprint back upstairs if necessary. Pulling her loose dark cardigan across her slender frame, she peeked around the corner into the spacious dining room. Seated in the bay window were the elderly couple from Liverpool, who stunk the place out with their daily kippers. At the other end, a woman in her mid-20s tucked into a bowl of cereal, while a toddler mashed banana into a high-chair food tray. Releasing the breath she'd been holding, Danniella tucked her dark brown bobbed hair behind her ears and tiptoed across the room towards her favourite table by the fire exit. The proprietor, Lorraine, burst through the door from the kitchen, holding a cafetiere. A curvaceous woman in her mid-50s, she beamed at Danniella as she poured the coffee. Have you seen that gorgeous sunshine, my dear? I was beginning to think the rain was never going to stop. I was just saying to my Nigel last night that we might have to start building an ark. She giggled at her own joke. Danniella smiled politely. Can I have some wholemeal toast, please? There's nothing on you, my dear. Are you sure I can't tempt you with something more substantial? A poached egg, maybe? Some beans? Just the toast, thanks. As you wish. Danniella pulled her cardigan across her chest again and closed her eyes for a moment, biting her lip. Poor Lorraine. Every morning she tried her best to open up a conversation, only to be cut off. Danniella hated being aloof towards such an affable woman, but she had to maintain that distance. If she didn't, there'd be questions, and she couldn't go there. Not yet. Possibly never. Opening her eyes again, she spied a copy of Bay News, abandoned on the next table, and flicked to the property section. Lorraine reappeared and placed a rack overloaded with triangles of thick toast on the table. Enjoy your breakfast, my dear. Thank you. If Danniella managed to get half a slice down her throat, she'd be doing well. She pushed the paper aside, selected a triangle, then froze, heart thumping, at the creak of the front door opening. Straining to listen, she could make out heavy footsteps in the lobby. Delivery for Lorraine Thorpe, called a woman's voice, and Danniella breathed again. Every morning, every single morning. She couldn't go on like this. After buttering the toast, Danniella took a bite, but it felt like gravel scraping down her throat. She managed about 2/3 before giving up and picking up the paper again. The woman with the toddler left, followed soon after by the Kipper couple. The property section, eh? Lorraine asked, as she cleared the vacated tables. Buying, renting, or browsing? Renting, hopefully. Sod it. She could talk about flat hunting, and if that led to questions about the past, she'd simply make an excuse to leave. It's not going very well. Apparently I'm being too fussy. Who says? Estate agents. Lorraine stopped stacking pots. What are you looking for? Only 3 things, and one of those is negotiable. Danniella counted her needs off on her fingers. 1 or 2 bed, not ground floor, ideally with a sea view. One of the agents actually laughed at me. Turns out it's more lucrative to rent to tourists for part of the year than a longer-term rent. Who knew? How long a lease are you wanting? Until my past catches up with me. Danniella's insides twisted. 3 months initially, hopefully longer. Lorraine picked up the pots. I've got an idea. Give me 5 minutes. Sipping on her coffee, Danniella leaned back and gazed around the empty dining room. Lorraine seemed to have taken the cringe-worthy 70s throwback name Sunny Days as license to go crazy with the colour yellow. White and yellow gingham cloths adorned the tables. The crockery was bright yellow, and the walls were pale lemon. Danniella's tastes were neutral and minimalist, but there was something about the explosion of colour in Sunny Days that lifted her dark mood each morning and gave her the much-needed strength to face the day. After 8 months of running, she felt so lost, so lonely, so weary. There was also something about Whitsborough Bay that felt safe, and she really hoped this was the place where she could start afresh. But she'd experienced that before, in other towns, and had ended up moving on. Lorraine bustled back into the dining room. Are you free at 11? I can be. My son Aidan has a top-floor flat to rent on Seaview Drive, overlooking North Bay. I think you'll love it. A couple of hours later, Danniella squinted up at the row of pastel-coloured Victorian 5-storey terraced properties on Seaview Drive, then turned to look down at the cliff gardens and at the North Sea beyond. Aidan's flat was in the blue building, Cobalt House. Danniella? A tall, dark-haired man,
probably in his late 20s, appeared in the doorway at the top of a flight of stone steps. "Yes, Aidan?"
"That's me. Come on up."
He shook Danniella's hand as she reached the top, held the door open for her, then indicated that she should follow him up the stairs.
"The flat's empty. A friend was renting it, but he's relocated to New York with work, as you do. It happened so fast that I haven't had time to look for a new tenant. If you like the place, your timing's impeccable."
"Are all the flats rented?" Danniella asked.
"It's a mix, but I know all the neighbours and can give you the full lowdown later if you want."
"Yes, please, if you don't mind."
"So, what do you do?"
Aidan asked.
"Mum said it's something to do with writing."
"I'm a proofreader and copy editor. Mainly crime or thrillers, but I work with some romance writers too."
"That's a bit of a contrast."
"True, but when the body count gets a bit high, it's good to have some light relief." He unlocked number 6 and they stepped into a light hallway with stairs ahead of them. She widened her eyes, not expecting a duplex.
"There's a video intercom system there."
Aidan pointed to the technology by the door.
"The lounge is to the right and the kitchen's to the left."
Danniella walked towards the huge bay window in the lounge, taking in the sweeping views from the Sea Rescue Sanctuary in the north, round to the castle in the south. "It's stunning."
"It's not too shabby, is it?"
Aidan said, the pride in his voice obvious.
"Kitchen?"
She reluctantly tore her gaze away from the window and crossed the landing to the kitchen.
"It was refitted in February,"
he said. The high-gloss cream units, cranberry-coloured range cooker, and real wood worktops and flooring were unexpected in an old property. It was exactly to her taste. Not that she'd have cared if it had been decked out in 70s Formica. The security arrangements had met the fourth requirement that she hadn't mentioned to Lorraine. It was safe. They ascended the stairs.
"There's a bathroom through there and a separate shower room. 2 of the bedrooms are the same size, so it depends on whether you want a sea or park view."
He pointed to another door.
"3rd bedroom, smaller, but still a good size."
Danniella ran her hands through her hair and shook her head. Damn. And it had been going so well. "Sorry, but I think 3 bedrooms will take me over my budget." Aidan smiled.
"You might be surprised."
Wrinkling her nose, she told him what she hoped to pay.
"There's some leeway, but not much." "Then we're good," he said. "Steve paid £20 a month more than your ideal. If you can match that, it's yours."
"I can, but are you sure?"
"Mum's a good judge of character and she rates you. No pets, non-smoker, tidy, pays on time. You sound like a dream tenant, so you'd be doing me a favour. Bedrooms?"
Stepping into the master bedroom, Danniella turned on the spot, taking in the stylish cream shabby chic bed, wardrobe, drawers, and dressing table. "I love it. You've got good taste, Aidan." He smiled.
"I can't take credit for it. The flat and furniture belonged to my wife."
"Belonged?"
"She died in a car crash 3 years ago."
"Car accident?" Danniella felt the ground shift beneath her, and the blood rush from her head. She grabbed hold of the door to steady herself. "Don't faint. Don't be sick. Please." A few deep gulps of air helped slow her racing heart. Aidan had stepped out onto the balcony, and thankfully didn't appear to have noticed her reaction.
"There's a table and a couple of chairs out here,"
he called.
"Perfect for morning coffee."
By the time he stepped back into the bedroom, she'd managed to compose herself. "I'm sorry about your wife. That must have been tough."
"Thank you. It was, but Elizabeth was terminally ill. We were expecting it. The accident made it a little sooner, but only by a couple of weeks, if that."
Imagine knowing your spouse was going to die and preparing for that, only for them to be killed ahead of their time. One of those scenarios was bad enough.
But how could someone even begin to recover from both? Looking at the bed in the second bedroom, it struck her that nobody would ever sleep in it. No family, no friends, nobody. This was it. This was her life from now on. Sadness enveloping her, she followed Aidan out and closed the door. "I didn't ask what you do," she said. "Similar field to you. I'm a travel writer. No dead bodies, though, unless you count the occasional unwanted cockroach." She probably wouldn't see much of Aidan once she'd settled in, but if she did, at least she could steer conversations towards work. Anything to avoid talking about the past, or death. "Why don't I leave you to look around on your own?" Aidan said. "I've got some calls to make, so I'll meet you outside." He disappeared down the stairs, and Danniella headed for the small balcony off the first bedroom. Leaning against the metal railings, she closed her eyes and gulped in the salty air. Gulls squawked overhead, the occasional engine revved, and she could just make out the gentle lapping of the waves. She opened her eyes again, looked towards the sea twinkling in the unexpected sunshine, and, for the first time in 8 months, she relaxed, properly relaxed. This was it. This was the place. At last. Chapter 3. Karen. "Breathe in. Lift your arms." Karen swooped her arms in a wide arc and held them above her head, her gaze sweeping around the group of 14 boot campers stretching out on North Bay's promenade. "Breathe out. Lower your arms and give each other high fives or fist bumps because you smashed that boot camp. The Awesome Award goes jointly to Becky and Jane for some seriously impressive planking. So, it's photo time for you two. Everyone else, have a great weekend, and I'll see you again on Tuesday." The boot campers said their goodbyes and set off along the promenade, while Becky and Jane posed for their photo, holding a bright yellow branded Bay boot camp flag. They've been great supporters of Karen's business, being personal training clients for 6 years, and the first to sign up when her boot camp started 2 years later. "Where do you think Ryan will take you tonight?" asked Becky, as they walked towards North Bay Corner together. "I'm hoping for Salt and Pepper Lodge. We haven't been there for ages," replied Karen. "How many years is it?" Becky asked. 13 since our first kiss at the end of college party, which is when we started seeing each other, and 5 since he proposed." "I can't believe you still haven't set a date," Jane said. "It was one of the first things we did." Karen shrugged. "Developing the PT business had to be the priority at first, then boot camp. To be fair, we'd probably have set a date by now if Ryan and Steph hadn't started that bloody running club last year. I can't believe how much time we've spent apart thanks to that." "Why are they still doing it?" Jane asked. "I thought it was just for the London Marathon, and that was, 3 weeks ago?" Karen nodded. "Tell me about it. It was the Hemberby half on Sunday, so they snuck that in too. It's finished now, though, thank God. Tonight will be our first proper evening together in about 8 months. I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to it. It's been a strain, but normal service is about to be resumed." Reaching North Bay Corner, they paused in front of Blue Savannah. A few brave punters were seated outside the cafe bar, huddled over their drinks, seemingly determined to take advantage of the rain-free evening, despite the chill still hanging in the air from a late afternoon downpour. "We'll see you on Tuesday," Becky said. "With big news," Jane added. "Pin him down to a date tonight before he sets up another sideline like coast steering. Oh God, don't mention that to Ryan, he'd love it." Karen waved them off, then jogged towards the car park next to Hernshaw Park, smiling to herself. Becky and Jane were right about it being the perfect opportunity to talk about the wedding. 5 years was a long time to be engaged with no timescale in mind. When Ryan proposed, she'd not been too bothered about rushing up the aisle. For her, the proposal had been more about the gesture of commitment than the big day itself. Lately, though, she'd started to think about weddings, Her best friend, Gemma, had moved in with her boyfriend, Sam, and it was only a matter of time before he popped the question. A few of her regular boot campers were tying the knot over the summer, as were a couple of her PT clients. Weddings were definitely in the air. It was time that hers was, too. "Ryan!" Karen called, kicking off her trainers in the hall. "Ryan!" She ran up the stairs of the 3-bed townhouse that they'd rented for the past 8 years. Pausing on the top floor landing, listening to the shower running in the wet room, she stripped off her sports gear before gently pushing the door open. Perfect opportunity to make up for lost time. Ryan was rubbing shower gel over his chest. Karen tiptoed behind him and pressed her naked body against his back. "I think you missed a bit," she said, wrapping her arms around him and rubbing the suds on his washboard stomach, getting lower with each circle of her hands. He moaned softly. "How was boot camp?" "Good. They worked hard." Her hands reached lower still. "Oh, speaking of hard." Ryan turned around, rubbing the suds from his eyes. "You know, you always have that effect on me." He kissed her, and she wrapped her arms around him, pressing her body close to his. "So, where are you taking me tonight?" she asked between kisses. Ryan tensed. "Tonight?" "Yes, tonight. You're taking me out." "Since when? I've made plans." Passion flowing down the drain with the suds, Karen dropped her hands and stepped back so she could see Ryan's face. "You're pranking me, yeah?" One look at his expression told her he wasn't. "Remind me." She stared at him for a moment, then shook her head, not daring to speak, because after months of patience, what she wanted to say wasn't going to be pleasant. How could he have forgotten? How? She snatched at a towel. "Kaz." Wrapping the towel around her, she fixed him with a hard stare. "Come on, then. What have you got on tonight that's so important?" "Steph and I are planning the next steps for Bay Runners." "What next steps? You promised me it was temporary, and we've returned to PT and boot camps as normal." "I know, but we think Bay Runners should become part of the core business." Karen folded her arms. "So basically, the two of you have made a decision about our business without consulting me?" "It wasn't like that. From where I'm standing, it was. Go on, then. You better rush round to your best friends and get planning, ain't you?" Karen stormed out of the bathroom to their bedroom, where she pulled on her PJs and clambered into bed, not caring that she was still wet. Ryan appeared in the doorway a couple of minutes later, with a towel around his waist. "What are you doing in bed?" "Watching TV and having an early night, seeing as the plans you have with our business partner are far more important than the ones you had with me." "Bloody hell, Karen. Stop being so cryptic. Hands up, I've forgotten what we had planned for tonight and I'm sorry. But it's been a crazy few weeks with the marathon, then the half. I've had a lot going on." "It's fine, forget it." She picked up the remote control and switched the TV on. Ryan turned around and switched it off, so Karen picked up the remote and switched it back on again. "You're being childish now." Ryan switched it off and stood in front of the receiver, so she couldn't connect with the remote. "Oh, really? And you're not?" "No, I'm trying to reason with you. I've admitted I messed up and I've apologised, even though I don't know what for. You've stormed off to bed and you won't tell me what I've done wrong." "You want to know what you've done wrong?" "That would be helpful." "You really don't know?" "Do I look like I know?" To her horror, Karen felt tears burning her eyes. She never cried, and she certainly didn't want to let him see how much it hurt her. He was usually good at this sort of stuff. How could he not have registered the date? Ryan was still staring at her, frowning. She desperately wanted him to leave her alone before she either broke down sobbing or yelled at him. Swallowing hard, she said, "You said we'd have a date night because we haven't spent any time together recently. That's all." Ryan rubbed his hair on a towel. "I can ring Steph and cancel." Too little, too late. "No, you and Steph do what you've planned. I've got a headache anyway. Could do with an early night." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Now shift so I can put the telly on." She pretended to be absorbed in a programme about building flat-pack homes, while Ryan wandered around the bedroom pulling on his clothes. "I'll see you later," he said, leaning over for a kiss. Karen turned her face slightly, so that he could only kiss her cheek. "Hope your planning goes well." "I'm sorry," he said again. She didn't trust herself to speak, so merely nodded. She managed to hold it in as he ran down the stairs, but the moment he closed the front door, a loud, agonised wail escaped from her, and she clung onto the duvet, sobbing. Chapter 4. Alison. "What are you doing this afternoon?" Chelsea asked, as they approached the end of their shift. Alison hesitated. Chelsea, early 40s, divorced, had a strong opinion on anything and everything, especially other people's relationships, and was never shy about voicing it. She was also like a tracker dog when it came to sniffing out a lie. "Food shopping, then preparing a roast dinner for Dave," she responded, trying to sound casual. Chelsea tutted. "Spoiling Dave for a change? Why'd you bother? He never spoils you. He forgot the anniversary and your birthday. Why not have an afternoon for you instead of that idiot?" "He's not an idiot." Cheeks burning, Alison grabbed the handover log and pretended to check it. What gave Chelsea the right to criticise Dave all the time? She'd never even met him. So why did she hold such a low opinion of him? Alison nearly laughed out loud as the irony struck her. It was her fault. Chelsea's opinion came from what Alison had told her, and clearly she hadn't painted him in a favourable light. "And he didn't forget my birthday," she added, in a calmer tone, keen to redeem Dave. "He got the dates mixed up, that's all. He was only a day late with his gift, and it was exactly what I wanted." Chelsea's shriek of laughter ricocheted off the marble walls, drawing curious glances from guests seated in the lobby. "A gift card?" Chelsea cried. "So much deep thought must have gone into that." "You know I love reading, so it was the perfect gift for me. Anyway, there's an ulterior motive for the roast. I'm hoping to persuade him to go abroad when we're off next month." "I thought Dave was finally fit in the kitchen." "He was, but it's waited 4 years already, so what's another few months? Besides, I'm used to the chaos." She wasn't. Drawer fronts coming off in her hands, cupboard doors hanging from their hinges, and a cold, concrete floor had turned her creative space into a place to avoid. "You hate your kitchen, though," Chelsea said. "Why not get the kitchen done and book a holiday for later?" A guest approached the reception desk, ending their conversation. Alison completed some paperwork, while Chelsea checked the woman in and answered a barrage of questions. Was Chelsea right about prioritising the kitchen over a holiday? Dave had never hidden his resentment at spending his free time on home improvements. Only last night, they'd spent an hour checking through the flat-pack boxes filling the dining room, when he'd muttered, "Can't believe I'll be spending my week off doing what I spend my working days doing. Some bloody holiday. Wish we were going abroad instead." She looked up from her checklist. "Oh, me too. Where would you fancy?" He smiled, then winked at her. "Do you remember Corfu?" "Best holiday ever," she said, pulse racing at the memory of the last-minute deal they'd taken to celebrate turning 21. It was 6 years ago, but she could remember every detail like yesterday. "Why don't you open that bottle of Rioja?" he suggested. "But it's a school night." "I feel like living dangerously." Giggling, Alison headed for the kitchen. The last time he'd suggested sharing a bottle of wine was the last time they'd been intimate. Maybe. Curled up together on the sofa, they spent the next hour or so reminiscing about Corfu. Lazy days by the pool had transitioned into nights filled with hot, passionate sex everywhere. The beach, a dark corner of a club, the pool, their balcony. I never wanted that holiday to end. Alison gently stroked Dave's thigh. "Me neither." He leaned towards her and she held her breath.
He was going to kiss her. He was going to... But he placed his empty wine glass on the lamp table beside her and yawned.
I'm done in. Early start. Night.
Oh, okay. I'll finish this, then I'll be up. Her voice sounded small and distant, but Dave didn't seem to notice. Without so much as a peck on the cheek, he left the room. Alison swigged the last of her wine, sighed, and sank back into the sofa, shoulders slumping. Not like Corfu, then. Never like Corfu. She put her glass down and picked up an A5-sized photo frame. What happened to us? She whispered, running her fingers across the image of the pair of them sipping cocktails at a swim-up bar, tanned, happy, and besotted with each other. You promised me you wouldn't change. You said we were family. Just the two of us. Always and forever. Alison swiped at her damp cheeks. I need you to be my family, Dave. You're the only one left. Mercedes arrived for the next shift just then, bringing Alison's focus back to the present. Chelsea was trapped answering a guest's questions, so Alison ran through the handover log, then escaped, keen to avoid more of Chelsea's Dave bashing. 5 minutes later, standing outside Bay Travel, Alison deliberated. Holiday or kitchen? She desperately wanted the kitchen fitted, but she also desperately wanted the man she loved to look at her the way he used to touch her, to kiss her, to tell her how much he loved her, to tell her she was his family, always and forever. She wanted intimacy. She wanted conversation. She wanted Corfu. Sod it. She pushed the door open and strode towards the section labelled Greek Islands. Holiday 1, kitchen 0. Rushing home from the supermarket, travel brochures weighing her bags down, Alison prepared the joint of beef, then popped it in the oven. She peeled and chopped vegetables, mixed Yorkshire pudding batter, and set the kitchen table. She lightly brushed her fingers over the gorgeous cerulean Denby dinner set, a housewarming gift from her grandma. Be quiet without you, her grandma had said when she presented it to Alison. But it's time for you to have a new home and start a new family. I miss you, Grandma, Alison whispered, holding one of the plates close to her chest. Why did you have to leave me too? Swallowing the lump in her throat, she took a deep breath and refocused. Special plates, posh cutlery, real material napkins instead of kitchen roll, and this shit tip of a kitchen. But it was fine. She could cope with it. The holiday would be more than worth the sacrifice if it helped them rekindle what they'd lost. Maybe she should make an effort too. Put a bit of slap on. Wear something nice. After showering, Alison slathered herself with some expensive body lotion she'd received from Secret Santa at work. Gazing into the small mirror above the sink, she carefully applied her makeup, then spritzed herself with perfume. Looking good, smelling divine. Back in the bedroom, she opened the wardrobe door, angling her body so she could ignore her reflection in the full-length mirror. One glance was all it usually took, but not today. She was feeling positive today. She was taking control. Running her hand along the hangers from right to left, Alison's jaw tightened as she rejected each item. Baggy, frumpy, black, too tight, more black, out of fashion. Dave hated it. Grey, dark grey, navy, black. She screwed up her eyes, stamped her feet, and released a frustrated squeal. When she opened her eyes, she was facing the mirror. The unforgiving mirror. She slammed the door shut and strode across the landing to the bathroom, shaking her head. What was she thinking? If Dave even noticed, a big if, he'd probably wrinkle his nose and say, "What's that stench?" Or curl his lip and say, "What's that muck on your face?" Or both. She wiped her face clean, scrubbed at her wrists and neck to remove all traces of perfume, then returned to the bedroom where she pulled on a comfortable greying bra
a pair of giant belly-warmer knickers, some leggings, and a baggy grey t-shirt. She'd made his favourite meal and brought out the Denby. That was more than enough. Dave arrived home shortly after 6.
"Something smells good. Is that what I think it is?"
he called from the hallway, a rare note of pleasure in his voice.
"It might be,"
Alison called, as she spooned hot fat over the roast potatoes, which were crisping to perfection.
"How was your day?" "Shite."
One of these days he'd surprise her and say, good. Or perhaps he'd ask her how her day had been. Yeah, right. When Dave reappeared 15 minutes later, he sat down at the kitchen table without even looking at her.
"What's this?"
His voice was terse as he picked up the brochure she'd laid on his placemat. Draining the water from the pan of carrots, her heart raced. It could go one of two ways. Please let it go well. Holiday brochure.
"Why?"
Because you said we should book a holiday.
"I didn't."
Alison put the carrots down and picked up the pan of peas. Maybe not book one then, but you said you'd rather go abroad instead of doing the kitchen, and it got me thinking that...
"Jesus, Ali, make your mind up,"
he snarled.
"You keep nagging me to fit the kitchen. You've got a million other jobs you want me to do too. And now you want to go off gallivanting to Greece. You can't have it all. And how do you think we're going to pay for a holiday? With fairy dust?"
We've got plenty of savings.
"Which was your idea in case of emergency. Not for extravagant holidays, you said."
I know, but Corfu was 6 years ago. I think we need a break. Silence. Alison dished up the food. Should she push it again? No. Clearly he'd had more of a shite day than usual. Maybe tomorrow. Forcing herself to smile, she placed his loaded plate in front of him. "And for dinner tonight, the chef is delighted to present all your favourites." Placing her plate down opposite him, Alison pulled a chair out, but stopped when she clocked his expression. Eyebrows knitted, lip curled in apparent disgust. "What's wrong now?" she demanded, her patience worn thin. Dave pointed at his plate.
"This. I thought you said it was all my favourites."
Had she forgotten to dish up something? Alison scanned the plate. Nope. She looked up at Dave, shrugging.
"Horseradish,"
he prompted. "Sorry, of course, I'll get it." But as she opened the cupboard door, Alison had a sinking feeling she'd forgotten to add it to her shopping list. She shuffled a few jars and bottles around, stomach churning. Crap. Slowly closing the door, she turned to face Dave. "We've run out. Sorry. All your other favourites are there."
"Which will taste like absolute shite without horseradish."
He pushed back his chair, making an ear-splitting screech across the floor.
"Nice one, Ali. I'll have to order pizza instead."
After she'd slaved away all afternoon? No way.
"You're not going to die from horseradish deficiency," she snapped. "Get it eaten and stop being so bloody childish."
His eyes widened.
"Childish? I'll show you childish."
It seemed to happen in slow motion. Dave knocked his plate with his hand as he rose to his feet. It spun across the table, crashing into hers, jettisoning both plates towards the floor. Gravy flew in every direction, covering the floor, the units, and Alison. Peas and carrots dispersed, and dollops of mash and roasties splattered onto the concrete floor, like islands in a sea of gravy. Her precious plate shattered, fragments scattering across the floor. With an anguished cry, Alison sank to her knees, reaching for the nearest shards. "My plates!" she sobbed, looking up at Dave helplessly. "My beautiful plates! What? Why?" Dave stared at her, his eyes cold and uncaring. He picked up the travel brochure and tossed it towards the recycling crate by the back door.
"Greek islands. You in shorts.
Or even worse, a bikini. You've got to be fucking kidding me.
When he slammed the front door, the whole house seemed to shake. Alison slumped back against the fridge freezer, heart thumping, hot tears rolling down her cheeks. What the hell had just happened? He was grumpy and he had a short temper, but he'd never been violent. Never. She stared at the pieces in her hand. Had Dave pushed the plates off the table deliberately? No, he wouldn't do that. He knew how much they meant to her. It had been an accident. Hadn't it? Chapter 5. Danniella.
Here you go. 6 Cobalt House is officially your new home,
Aidan said. Danniella smiled at the I Love Yorkshire keyring he handed her. Thanks, Aidan, for everything.
As I said before, you're doing me a favour. Good tenants are hard to find.
How do you know I'm going to be a good tenant?
I might be planning to set up a cannabis farm or bury a few bodies under the floorboards.
Aidan raised an eyebrow.
I think someone's been editing too many crime novels.
Danniella laughed out loud at Aidan's comment. The sound seemed so unfamiliar. She hadn't laughed since... She shook her head. I'd best start moving in then. Aidan nodded.
I was thinking we could take a couple of bags or cases up now. I'll run through a few things with you, then help you bring in the rest.
I couldn't ask you to do that. You've done so much already.
Honestly, it's not a problem. Unless you really want to do 10 trips up 3 flights of stairs on your own.
She smiled once more.
When you put it like that.
Thank you. Again. Lorraine stopped by later that afternoon.
I won't stay long, my dear, as I'm sure you've got loads to do. I couldn't let you move into your new home without some flowers, though.
She handed Danniella a large yellow bouquet. They're beautiful, Danniella said. Thank you. Have you got time for a coffee?